Canadian Press.
Yes, I'm wondering, there's been a bit of a social media argument going on between some of your members and Jerry Butts, among others, about the campaign against the Omar Khadr payment that Conservatives are doing in the U.S. at the same time as the NAFTA negotiations. Do you think that there's potential to create a backlash, a bad backlash, at a crucial juncture?
Well, let me say this.
Are Conservatives responsible for fueling them?
The responsibility for any of the negative outcomes of the Omar Khadr payout lies with the Liberals. It was their choice to, first of all, make the payment over and above the compensation that Omar Khadr already received when he was repatriated to Canada. It was their decision to unroll it in the bizarre fashion that they did. And the only people now who are trying to make this assertion are the Liberals themselves. And this comes on the heels of them desperately trying to deflect blame to others. First, they blamed the Charter. And when that argument was basically laughed at, they tried to blame the Supreme Court. And when we pointed out that previous governments respected court decisions, accepted court decisions, and took action to remedy this situation by bringing Omar Khadr back to Canada, they now are trying to shift blame to other aspects of the story. If they were so concerned about the backlash, I would ask, did they give anyone in the U.S. a heads up? Did they let their negotiating team in Washington know that it was coming? Did they talk to the State Department? Did they let anybody know this was happening? This is clearly just an argument that the Liberals are trying to deflect attention to the crux of the issue, which is that they chose to make a $10.5 million payment, allegedly $10.5 million, because they still refuse to confirm the actual amount. And they realize that Canadians are very upset about this and outraged, and so they're trying to distract from that. Conservatives will always present a united front in the United States when we are talking about important issues like trade, making sure the border stays open to goods and services that improve the economy on both sides of the border. But I think it's important for everyone to be aware that the vast majority of Canadians do not support this payout.
But would you then not, I mean, would it not be perhaps prudent to confine your campaign against the Khadr payment to Canada? Like, why take it to the U.S.?
I think it's important that first of all, again, only the Liberals are suggesting that this is the case. It's not credible to think that somehow the news and commentary in Canada stops at the U.S. border. I don't know that anybody actually believes that. So I would just reject the premise of the question. I think Conservatives will continue to criticize this decision and refute the errors that the Liberals are putting out. As I mentioned, they continually try to get people to believe things that just aren't true. There is no court payout ordering this payment. The only court decision that spoke to remedy spoke to repatriation, which happened. And the very fact that Omar Khadr is free in Canada today is because of actions that the previous government took to remedy the rights violation that the Supreme Court ruled took place. And anything above and beyond that was a choice by the Liberal government. And it's no surprise that they're desperately trying to latch on to another angle of the story to deflect attention from the core of the matter, which is that this was a personal decision by Justin Trudeau to go above and beyond what any court order ever indicated was the responsibility of the government.
Laura Stone, Globe and Mail. Oh, sorry, Joyce Napier, CTV. You're next. Excuse me,
Good afternoon. Well, I'm going to pick up a little bit on Joan's question. What would you like in the Khadr case? I see your point, but what would you like to happen now? Is the die not cast? Is it not done?
It is very frustrating that the way the Liberals structured it and the fact that they rushed the payout through. To your point, yes, they have effectively limited the avenues to correct the situation. I note especially the fact that they've made it extremely difficult for Tabitha Speer, the widow of Christopher Speer, the person who was killed because of the actions of on the battlefield that day, to get what a court process has determined she is entitled to. So there is a certain level of frustration with the fact that the Liberals have done this in such a way that prevents recourse. But I think the important thing for our Conservative team to point out to Canadians is that there were other options. The Prime Minister did not have to do this. There is no court order ordering this. I think it's important for our allies in the United States, our friends, our in many cases our family. They know that Canadians do not stand behind this issue. This is not something that the vast majority of Canadians are happy with. In fact, quite the opposite. They're quite outraged, and they share in their compassion and their sympathy is with the family of the victims. And that's what is so frustrating about this is the cold-hearted manner in which the Liberal government has approached this issue has prevented any compassion being shown to the Scheer family. And I think it's regrettable that the Prime Minister is refusing to reach out to Tabitha Scheer. I think that is something that he could have shown some level of compassion for the widow of the victim. And I'll just say once again, if Omar Khadr is truly sorry, if he is truly remorseful for his actions that he has admitted to doing, he would pay every single cent of that settlement to Tabitha Scheer so that she can provide for her 2 children who now live without a father.
Laura Stone, Globe and Mail.
Just back onto the Khadr issue. So today the Prime Minister said that the NAFTA renegotiations are too important for partisanship. And he said that in response to a question about what the Conservatives are doing both here and the United States. So it sounds like he's asking you to stop talking about this in the United States. Will you do that? Why or why not?
So I think, again, the only person that's trying to make a link between those 2 issues is Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party. And I think it's so clear why they're doing this, because they realize that they are so offside with the overwhelming majority of Canadians, and that people are seeing the cold-hearted decision to rush this payment through, effectively preventing Tabitha Scheer from having any kind of compensation that a court has ruled she's entitled to. So, if the House were sitting, if this payment had if this decision had been made when the House was sitting and the opposition parties could hold the government to account, I would ask the question then: if he is so worried about the relationship, did he give a heads up to the State Department? Did he inform his negotiation team in Washington that this was coming so that they could prepare for it? I think this is just a last-ditch attempt to try to cling to some other aspect of the story that deflects blame. So I don't link the 2 at all. I reject the premise of that. And when it comes to NAFTA, I have reiterated our commitment as a Conservative team that we will always present a united front on trade negotiations. Trade is too important to allow partisan differences to get in the way. If the Liberals are going to fight for a robust free trade agreement that allows Canadians to sell into the United States and goods and services to flow freely and protect those areas of our economy that have traditionally, the government has traditionally stood behind, then we will be right there with them the entire way. And I've instructed my members of Parliament who are accompanied on these trips to speak with one voice as Canadians to make sure that we're doing what's in the best interests of Canadian businesses and Canadian workers.
So you might not make the link with NAFTA and the Khadr payment, but they are. So do you think that it could potentially impact the negotiations? What's your view on it? Have you been hearing anything from the Americans on it?
I reject the premise that the 2 are linked, and I would just suggest that if the Liberals are so worried that that is the case, then they should answer the question: what did they do to prepare? What signals did they send? They allowed this to all be leaked out and to finally speak on the subject on July 4th. What were their motivations behind all of that? It's up to them to explain the link. They can't just make an accusation when they're being subject to heavy criticism by the vast, overwhelming majority of the Canadian people. They can't just say, well, now please give us a pass because it's affecting this other issue. I don't believe it does, and I don't believe that it justifies not being critical of a payment that was a choice that goes over and above the compensation that Omar Khadr already received. That is what is so enraging for Canadians, is they recognize the fact that in a very limited, narrow capacity under a previous Liberal government, Canadian officials acted improperly. Conservatives accept that finding. We accept the Supreme Court's ruling. We accept the premise that the Charter, the principle that the Charter applies to every single Canadian citizen. And what Canadians understand is that a remedy was already provided. Compensation was already provided to Omar Khadr. He was brought back to Canada and able to enjoy the very rights and freedoms that he was fighting against in Afghanistan. That's where this story should have ended. Anything that was paid out to him is over and above what the courts ruled that he was entitled to. So that's why what is so enraging, and I reject the premise that the Liberals are trying to link those 2 issues.
And regarding Omar Khadr and what your colleagues have said in the U.S. When 2011, when members of the NDP went to Washington to lobby against Keystone XL, Mr. Harper had talked about treason, and so had some of your colleagues. I mean, why is there a difference here? Well, there's a significant difference because the actions of the former members in Washington was to block a very important project for Canada's economy. Our members in Washington, when they go to Washington, work very hard to support Canadian projects that are important to Canada. We support NAFTA. We support the principle of open borders for our products and services. We work with the government on these issues. As for Khadr, that's such a different issue. There is no link between the free trade agreement and Mr. Khadr's situation. The only group that wants to make that link is the Liberals, and I reject that principle.